Hello, everybody. Here we are in Austin, Texas, at the 2008 Telelogic user group. I guess there's only one. Innovation 2008, it's called. And we've got another guest.
My name's Andy Gurd, and I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager for the Telelogic Doors product at Telelogic.
Working on the door stuff, of course, you're involved in a lot of requirements management and those sort and that sort of thing, obviously.
Yeah.
And you know, I have to confess, I come from the I guess the software world a lot more than the sort of Telelogic systems world. And so, you know, I mean, to start out with, I'm curious how, if anyway, how sort of requirements management differs in the customer base that you're typically operate in, or if there's any difference at all.
Some of the core principles of what you do with requirements would be the same whether you're developing a piece of software that's being used in a financial services application, or whether you're developing perhaps an avionics subsystem or an infotainment system, for a car. But there are also some key differences as well. A lot of it's to do with the degree of rigor and formality. We're sort of talking about the history of the Doors product. It actually came out of the guy who created it in the first place. Dr. Richard Stevens actually came out of a European Space Agency project.
Oh, okay.
So really grew out of a discipline in the aerospace and defence industry where you're particularly mandated by the federal and government agencies to show compliance and traceability back to the original statement of requirements. So it's kind of evolved out of that. So there is definitely a degree of formality in the process. You have to show that traceability all the way through a product development life cycle. There's also a lot more perhaps criticality to the system because you're talking about things that are safety or even life critical in some cases. So you need to have a lot more rigor to the development process and make sure you're really adhering to the specifications. Actually talking to an automotive customer recently, we did an interview with them, and one of the things that they were saying was they're working on this collision avoidance by braking system. And if you miss a requirement there, and you're traveling at 70 miles an hour and the car puts the brakes on, obviously it's catastrophic. So there's a degree of difference in the level of complexity and rigor in the systems development as perhaps in some software development. It's not just about traceability within requirements. What you want to do to have really good processes is link the requirements to your designs. Again, whether it's a software design or electronic or mechanical design, you want it also linked into the tests cases you're going to run. Those should actually be based off of the requirements, because you shouldn't just be testing that what you designed worked. You should actually be testing to prove you actually met the requirements in the first place.
I'm also always curious when it comes to sort of life cycle management things, like what that sort of post-deployment or post-delivery process is, like getting the feedback cycle in, so that you're not only concerned with the creation of the software and then you sort of like kick it out the door and wish it well, right? Like I mean, how are you finding people use Doors to sort of track the software out in the wild and sort of improve it, or the system?
It's true, actually. We quite often get into the trap perhaps sometimes of talking about, even when we talk about systems rather than software, you get into talking about the development life cycle, whereas actually requirements engineering, requirements management practices are much wider than that. I mean, they're really from cradle to grave. They're really from conception of idea of the product through to end of life. So that's not only when you've it's gone to manufacturing and you've shipped it out of the door, but it's all of the issues that might come back through warranty and maintenance. So they're all through to how you are going to phase out that particular perhaps fleet of aircraft or ships or whatever it might be, or models of cars. As you're phasing those out, there'll be requirements that respect to that as well. So you have to have that process ongoing. So one of the key elements with requirements management is that it should be very closely linked with your change management process, because you're going to get in change requests, or that change request could be a defect as to something that's actually gone wrong in the product, perhaps after delivery, and you want that fed back in to perhaps change the requirements for the next time you build a similar product of that.
I'm always curious to hear, after the sort of general discussion of requirements management and things, like what it's actually like I guess, beyond the door there, out in the wilds and everything. And I mean, are there some, no one ever likes to name names or anything, but I mean, are there some interesting sort of uses of doors that you've seen out there?
There's quite a wide range of different applications and different products that people are using it for. Actually, having mentioned, there are organisations that have been focused more on the complex part of their system, so they might have been using it as the electronic subsystems in a car.
Right.
Now they're actually, we've got customers now who are now saying we want to manage the requirements for the whole car. So even the requirements for the bumpers and the trunk and everything else would all be managed and held together.
That's a completely different type of thing.
to get that all linked together. You've got it used for aircraft, federal defence systems. It's also actually, though, not only just applicable to those sort of industrial sector type applications. We are actually seeing that in sort of mission critical enterprise systems in, say, financial services sector as well. Those types of projects are starting to exhibit the need and the maturity level that we see in the systems world as well. One of the things we've seen and the uptake of requirements management in the industrial sector is driven by a lot of regulatory compliance and need to demonstrate conformance. Well, of course, with what's going on right now, I suspect there'll be even more regulations and enforcement put in place on the financial services sector. They already have things like Sarbanes-Oxley, and insurance has HIPAA to comply to. So requirements management tool is a good way of enabling you to show that traceability.
With Rational and Telelogic being together, there are some, and you sort of address some of these ideas that there's sort of I don't know, an existing or different way of doing requirements management in the software world, or not so much different, but sort of differently prioritized, right? And the complexity is slightly different. And I mean, the door's reputation seems to be pretty good in the area that it works in. And I wonder, and you were getting to this with some of the financial service things, but I wonder if there's a pull of software people coming into doors, or vice versa. Like how sort of the roadmaps or the mixture of those two worlds, like you see them sort of playing
Obviously,
out.
in the total portfolio in IBM now, we have both the Telelogic Doors product for requirements management. There's also the Rational Requisite Pro product on the requirements management side as well. But what we've seen, although there's definitely some degree of functional overlap. I mean, they both manage requirements, they both do traceability type functionality. What we've actually found is they are actually being used, and their strengths are in different domains. Doors has been primarily used in the industrial sector, in systems engineering environments, and more recently some crossover into what we sort of define, I suppose, as more complex or enterprise type IT applications. Whereas Requisite Pro has been more adopted in software development teams, and perhaps the more simpler type IT projects. And we see that we do see a need for different tools for different processes. Not everybody needs, not every requirements management situation actually needs all of the capabilities,
all the rigor and everything
of doors, and there may be simpler types of projects that are well served by Requisite Pro. And that will continue to be maintained, and we're going to continue to move forward. One of the really exciting things, I think, on the roadmap that we realised very soon after starting to talk together with the Rational requirements team was that we were both thinking of expanding out from focusing on managing of requirements, so traceability, change management, impact analysis, versioning, baselining of the requirements, to what about the problem of actually capturing the requirements correctly and accurately, and actually making sure those requirements are a true reflection of what the customer needs, and moving into the world of what's being termed as requirements definition. So we were working on a product, we came and found that Rational were also working on a product, and what we're going to do is the Rational Requirements Composer is actually coming out its first version very soon, integrated with Requisite Pro, focused more on IT software development. But what we're going to do in middle of next year is we're going to bring out, there'll be another version of Requirements Composer with more systems requirements definition capabilities built into it, and it will be integrated with Doors as well. So we're already seeing some immediate opportunities from coming together.
Like you're saying, the requirements composer is sort of the idea of gathering together the requirements, and making that easier for people who have the requirements in their head to express it to the people who will help fulfill those requirements.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely for people like business analysts and requirements analysts who would work directly with customer stakeholders inside a business in order to discuss with them what their requirements are and get a good idea and formulate those requirements before they can become things that get managed throughout the rest of the life cycle in DAWs or Requisite Pro, depending on what type of application it is you're managing.
You were talking earlier about how, I was asking about the sort of the full life cycle of software requirements tracking, or just the life cycle of software development, which obviously is run by tracking the requirements and seeing if you're getting what you want. And of course, like in the Rational portfolio, there's a huge amount of sort of quality things or testing things. And I wonder how the existing like DOORS stuff sort of fits into the QA process, and like how you're sort of integrating with or working together with those existing sort of QA sorts of frameworks that are out there.
Yeah, that's a really exciting area actually. We've always seen quite a pull to make sure that what you're doing in the testing world is linked with requirements. That QA should be linked into the requirements process right the way through the development life cycle. And we've had some built-in simple capabilities inside of DOORS for setting up test cases and linking them back to requirements and recording test runs of manually run tests. And then we've had integrations with third-party test management tools in order to facilitate linking requirements and test cases and so on together. But actually, Rational are coming out right now with a new product in the test planning and test case planning area, in that they're bringing out a product called Rational Quality Manager. And we see this as a really key area that organizations do want to link QA up with the requirements process. So in Q1 09 there'll actually be an integration between DOORS and RQM. So it'll mean the requirements analyst is working inside of DOORS, defining requirements. Those requirements can be imported into Rational Quality Manager, so the QA person working inside a Quality Manager will allocate them to a test plan, will derive test cases from those requirements, will then go off and actually execute those tests.
Right, it sort of drives the labor that the QA people do, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and after the test cases are actually executed, the test status information will actually come back out of Quality Manager, back into DOORS, so that the project manager and the requirements analyst can actually check the progress in terms of quality against the requirements. Because if you've still got outstanding defects against a requirement, well, it's not fulfilled. But if you've shown all the tests have passed, well, that requirement is probably ready to be released into the product.
Well, great. Well, thanks for taking this time to talk to us. It's always fun to see what's going on in the world of requirements management.
Great, my pleasure.
Thanks.